What you are about to hear is not mere chance. It is not random nor accidental. Something deeper, more ancient than reason, has drawn you here. And by the end of this message, you may begin to sense why. There are stories etched into the fabric of your being that did not begin with you, yet they seem destined to find resolution in you. Wounds you never personally lived through still pulse in your chest. They are the silent echoes of sorrows passed down through bloodlines, ancestral grief woven into your very breath. These are not memories, but inheritances, patterns that repeat like rituals, choices made in your name before you ever had the power to choose. And then, one day, without knowing how or why, you awaken with a subtle but undeniable ache in your chest. Not a wound, but a summons, a sacred discontent. A feeling that you were not born just to live, but to transform something. Carl Jung called this the individuation process, the awakening of the self beyond the mask of the persona, the reclaiming of unconscious forces that have silently dictated your path. He once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And this is where you stand now, at the edge of fate, holding the pen that can rewrite it. There are burdens you were never meant to carry forever, yet you feel them because your soul said yes to something ancient. Not to reject your lineage, but to redeem it. Not to separate from your roots, but to water them with awareness. You are not here to continue the story. You are here to finish the chapter that no one before you dared to end. And this is not because you are stronger than those who came before. It is because you are more conscious. The pain still exists, the confusion still lingers, but now there is also vision. A glimmer of purpose buried beneath the weight. You did not come to suffer what others suffered. You came to liberate what they could not. This is the sign that your life is not just a continuation, it is a turning point. And now we begin the journey of recognizing the 6 signs that your soul did not come to repeat, but to close the cycle. The first sign that you came to close a cycle is a sacred discomfort with what your family once called normal. Not anger, not a rebellion, but a quiet, burning awareness. It begins like a whisper from the soul, a flicker of unrest when others remain settled. You sit at the same table, hear the same stories, watch the same dynamics unfold, but something in you tightens. You feel the weight of unspoken grief in the room. You sense the invisible contracts signed in silence, to endure, to please, to never speak of what hurts. And though your mouth stays shut, your spirit begins to stir. You are not judging them, you are simply awakening. What they call love feels conditional. What they call strength feels like survival. What they call sacrifice feels like inherited exhaustion. Carl Jung spoke of the family unconscious as a hidden web of ancestral memories and unresolved emotions that live not only in the psyche, but in the body, in the very way we breathe and belong. And the moment you feel this discomfort, not as a passing emotion, but as a persistent knowing, you are already stepping outside that web. You begin to see clearly what others have learned to normalize, the emotional silences, the roles everyone plays without question, the guilt offered as currency, and though you try, you cannot unsee it. You've tried to fit in, to mirror the script, to soften the truth for the sake of peace. But now, every time you betray your own knowledge to preserve the illusion, a part of you fades. Because your soul was not sent here to repeat, it was sent here to rewrite, not to destroy what came before, but to cleanse it through presence. This discomfort is not a flaw, it is the sacred fire of transformation. You feel it when a relative makes the same resigned comment they always do, when a sibling repeats the same emotional dance that was inherited but never examined, when someone praises a pattern that secretly broke you. And you cannot laugh, you cannot pretend, you cannot remain blind. You have outgrown the language of silence. And though this makes you feel estranged, it also makes you a threshold, the one who sees what others cannot and carries what others could not. You are not here to correct them. You are here to correct the story, not to carry the lineage like a burden, but to carry it consciously, with reverence and truth. You are pruning the family tree, not to sever, but to let light in. And that is not betrayal, it is healing. Jung said that those who look inside awaken. And that is what is happening. You are awakening not only for yourself, but for those who came before you, and for those who will come after you. You are the hinge between the wound and the wonder. You are the silent revolution, not to reject your roots, but to release their pain. You are the moment when the cycle ends and the soul finally breathes again. The second sign that you came to close a cycle is this. You feel deeply moved by stories you never lived, yet they live inside you. These are not simply emotional reactions, they are echoes of a deeper remembrance. A grief that touches the marrow without explanation. A sadness that arrives uninvited, without context, but with undeniable weight. Someone speaks of a sorrow that happened long before your birth, and suddenly your chest tightens, your eyes burn, you feel the ache as though it were your own, but it is not your personal memory, it is ancestral, and your soul recognizes it. Carl Jung taught us that the psyche is not sealed within the boundaries of one lifetime. It stretches across generations, across timelines, interwoven with the unconscious field of the family and the collective. What you are feeling is not fantasy. It resonates. Your sensitivity is not weakness. It is receptive. You are not broken. You are open. You are attuned to what others have silenced, to what was left behind in the shadows of the lineage. You are the one through whom the uncried tears find their voice. This is not imagination, this is inheritance. You were born into a river of stories, some spoken, many unspoken. You did not just inherit eye color or family traditions. You inherited the silences. They withheld forgiveness, the buried shame, the unacknowledged loss. And though no one handed it to you in words, you feel it in your bones, in the way certain rooms make your skin prickle. In this way, a lullaby or an old photograph makes something stir in your chest. A signal, a vibration, something unfinished that has chosen you not to suffer, but to end with you. Jung spoke of the ancestral unconscious as a living organism, one that seeks balance through awareness. The soul of a family is always searching for someone awake enough to bear witness, someone strong enough to feel. You are that soul. And while it may feel like too much at times, it is not because you are weak. It is because you are open to the truth. Because your body, your dreams, your emotions have become a vessel through which ancient pain is being acknowledged at last. There is no manual for this work, no applause, no visible reward, but there is quiet liberation. Each time you let yourself feel without turning away, each time you let the inherited ache rise through your chest and exit your body as tears or words or silence, you release more than just your own burden. You begin to cleanse the entire system. You bring breath to what was suffocating in secrecy. You do not do this to become a hero. You do this because you cannot look away, because something in you refuses to pass it on, and that refusal is sacred. You are not overreacting, you are remembering, and remembrance is how the wound begins to lose its power. You are not carrying this pain alone, you are transmuting it. You are transforming the ghost into a message, the silence into a voice, the grief into a new kind of love. This is what it means to close a cycle. Not with drama, but with presence. Not with blame, but with courage. Not with resistance, but with the willingness to feel. You are the doorway your ancestors were waiting for. and your tears are the water that softens the ground for something new to grow. The third sign that you have come to close a cycle is often the one that arrives first and lingers longest. You have always felt different. Not better, not broken, just different. It is a sensation that has followed you like a quiet thread through the fabric of your life, a subtle dissonance, a sense that you see through things others accept, that what they call normal feels hollow to you. Since childhood, you have carried a gaze that peers beneath the surface, a heart that feels deeper, and a mind that questions what others inherited without resistance. You have never truly felt like you belonged, not because you lacked love, but because you carried something that could not be explained. Carl Jung wrote that the individual who seeks to become whole must often walk away from the collective patterns of their tribe. That individuation is not isolation, but liberation. And that is what you are beginning to understand. Your difference was never a flaw. It was a compass, a signal from the soul that you came to do something that hasn't been done before, not to rebel for rebellion's sake, but to illuminate a new path, the path of the conscious one, the one who wakes up and dares to stay awake in a system that rewards sleep. You have likely tried to dim it, to silence it, to conform for the sake of peace. You wore the masks, spoke the expected lines, rehearsed the inherited roles. But inside, a fire burned, quietly, persistently, asking you to remember, and each time you betrayed that inner truth to be accepted, you felt it flicker. The loss of a part of you that didn't know how to lie. Now you understand that belonging at the cost of your soul is not belonging. It is self-abandonment, and you are done abandoning yourself. This feeling of not fitting in is not proof that you are lost. It is proof that you are awake, that your energy carries a different code, one written not in obedience, but in vision. And yes, it makes others uncomfortable. Your presence holds up a mirror. You are not trying to provoke, but simply by being yourself, you reveal what others have repressed. You stir the waters they have worked so hard to keep still. But you are no longer willing to shrink for their comfort. You have realized that the discomfort you cause is not a problem to fix, but a truth to face. You now walk with clarity, with calm, with depth. You know your light cannot be dimmed without cost, and so you shine, not for attention, but for alignment. You do not demand others follow, you simply stop betraying your own path. And that alone is revolutionary. Jung taught that healing begins the moment you stop living out the inherited script and start carrying your own destiny. You are doing that now, choosing honesty over tradition, depth over performance, self-loyalty over approval. And that shift ripples outward, even if no one claps, even if you are misunderstood, even if you walk parts of this path alone. Because in truth, you are never truly alone. Every time you say no to repetition, you say yes to evolution. Every time you listen to your soul instead of the noise, you break the cycle. Every time you let go of what never fit, you return to what was always true. And that is not rejection, that is reverence. You do not reject your family, you remember who you are beyond the role you were assigned. And in doing so, you become the turning point in the lineage. Not through force, but through presence. Not through argument, but through coherence. Not through loud rebellion, but through the quiet truth of someone who finally decided to live without pretending. You have not come to fit in, you have come to free the story. And you are doing it. One breath, one truth, one choice at a time. The fourth sign that you have come to close cycles is the quiet, reverent awareness that your life is not isolated. Your choices ripple. They move not only through your present, but reach into the soil of your ancestry and stretch toward those who are yet to be born. You begin to understand that healing is not just an act of self-care. It is a sacred disruption, one that liberates the unseen, one that rewrites the unconscious agreements your lineage has carried for generations. Carl Jung spoke of the collective unconscious, but he also taught that individual transformation, when done consciously, alters the field for all. At first, you may have thought your decision to set a boundary, to walk away, to speak a truth, was yours alone. But the deeper you went, the more you began to feel it, the shift, a subtle unraveling, as though every step forward was unwinding a knot buried deep in your family tree. That you do not carry the weight of 1,000 silent yeses uttered by those who never had the courage or freedom to speak. That when you choose authenticity over appeasement, you're not just breaking a pattern, you are setting someone free. And so your actions become ceremonial. Each decision made in alignment becomes an act of remembrance and of release. You no longer move from ego or from urgency. You move from clarity. You speak not to control, but to be free. You are no longer driven by rebellion. You are moved by restoration. You do not set fire to the roots. You open space for new growth, for new stories to emerge. You are not punishing the past. You are redeeming it. You begin to feel the weight and the grace of what it means to be the one who sees. You notice how old dynamics dissolve when you no longer participate, how silence becomes sacred when it is no longer used to suppress, but to hold space for truth. Carl Jung said, "One of the most powerful ways to heal the past is to live authentically in the present." And that is what you have begun to do. You live with intention, not perfection, with humility, not performance. You no longer need recognition because you carry resonance. You feel the thread of fate, changing texture in your hands. You also begin to sense when something unseen shifts. When a long-held pain loosens, when an old emotional posture no longer controls you. You recognize it in the peace that follows your no, in the strength that follows your stillness. You see how your healing settles into places that were once only chaos. And even if no one thanks you for it, even if it goes unnamed, your soul knows. It knows you did not come here only to repeat. You came to remember, to choose, to carry consciousness where there had been reaction. Jung once said that what remains unconscious will eventually be lived out as fate, and perhaps the deepest part of your awakening is realizing that you no longer live out what was passed down blindly. You now meet it with awareness. You stand at the edge of a story that was never yours and say, "This ends with me." Not out of blame, but from the deep knowing that transformation does not always roar. Sometimes it breathes. Sometimes it simply chooses again. And in that sacred choice, a future is rewritten. A soul returns to its center, and the cycle quietly but profoundly closes. The fifth sign that you have come to close cycles arises as a quiet but undeniable urge to cleanse. This longing does not begin in the hands, but in the soul. It is not merely the need to tidy a room or clear a drawer. It is the deeper impulse to free your life of what no longer carries truth. This instinct emerges like a whisper from the unconscious, asking you to look not only at the dust that gathers on your shelves, but at the emotional residue that has silently gathered within your psyche. Carl Jung taught that what we refuse to bring into consciousness will eventually emerge through our reality. And now, you are beginning to feel the weight of what has been unspoken, unexamined, and unseen. There comes a moment when you no longer tolerate what once seemed harmless. Certain conversations begin to feel heavy, certain relationships begin to feel distant, not because they have changed, but because you have. Your energy begins to evolve, and with that, so does your capacity for discernment. You no longer cling from habit. You no longer stay from fear. You begin to question the loyalties you have inherited, the obligations wrapped in guilt, the roles you were expected to perform without question. You ask yourself, is this mine? Does this belief, this bond, this burden, still speak to who I am becoming? And the answer, often, is no. So you begin to let go. Sometimes it looks like removing clothes you once wore to hide. Other times, it is stepping away from conversations that echo patterns of avoidance and self-betrayal. It can be subtle, even invisible. Choosing silence over explanation, saying no without apology, resting without guilt, releasing the need to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding. Every act of release becomes a sacred ritual, a declaration that your peace matters more than pleasing, that your presence no longer negotiates its worth for inclusion. Jung said that the journey of individuation requires us to integrate what has been pushed into shadow, and cleansing is not rejection, it is integration. It is standing before all you have carried and gently saying, I see you, I honor you, but I no longer need to carry you forward. You are not mine to drag any longer. This process is not always graceful. Sometimes it stings. Sometimes it leaves you with empty spaces that ache with unfamiliar quiet. But those spaces are sacred. They are the womb of your next becoming. The pause where your soul catches its breath. The moment where your true self begins to emerge from under the rubble of inherited roles. And here lies the paradox. You are not shedding to escape your past. You are shedding to remember your essence. To come home to what was always there, beneath the noise, beneath the scripts, beneath the survival. The more you cleanse, the more clearly you hear your inner voice. The less you carry, the more freely you move. The clearer your space, the louder your truth becomes. Each item you release, each thought you examine, each tie you loosen, is not abandonment. It is reverence. Reverence for your soul. Reverence for the ones who came before and could not do what you now choose. Reverence for those who will come after, walking lighter because you chose to live with intention. This is not a trend, it is not self-help, it is soul work, and it requires a fierce kind of love, a love that does not cling but clears, a love that does not control but chooses, a love that no longer acts from fear but from freedom. You are not emptying your life, you are preparing it to be inhabited by what is real. And this is how a cycle ends. Not with a grand announcement, but with a quiet decision. I will no longer live from the wound. I will live from the truth. The sixth sign that you have come to close a cycle is perhaps the most courageous of all. It reveals itself not in grand declarations, but in the quiet resilience of your heart still beating open after all it has endured. You have not shut yourself off. Though the world has given you every reason to build walls, you have chosen instead to keep the gates of your soul ajar. You have allowed the wind to move through you, even when it stung, because something within you knew the truth. Closing would be survival, but it would not be healing. Carl Jung taught that true transformation does not begin when we harden in response to pain, but when we refuse to be shaped by it unconsciously, when we stop acting from the wound and start choosing from awareness. And you, even after the betrayals, the absences, the words that never came, the embraces that turned cold, still chose to feel. Not out of naivety, but out of depth. You understood that numbness may protect, but it also paralyzes. And so you let yourself tremble. You let yourself cry. You let yourself remain soft where others turned to stone. This choice was not comfortable. It was sacred. To stay available after loss, to love again after disappointment, to walk into the fire of intimacy without armor, is a revolution of the soul. Your openness is not weakness. It is wisdom gained through presence. You chose to walk through the storm, not to be admired, but because your soul remembered a different path, a path not marked by repetition, but by redemption, not forged by defense, but by devotion. Jung once said that what is not transformed is repeated, and in your choice to remain open, you broke a pattern of emotional exile that has echoed through generations. You did not heal by force. You healed by refusing to abandon your essence, by choosing to speak with honesty instead of manipulation, to leave without hatred, to grieve without vengeance, to remember without bitterness. And each time you did, even if no one noticed, you realigned the entire system. You showed your ancestors, living and dead, that there is another way. That love does not have to be punished, that loyalty does not mean silence, that strength can look like softness that does not shatter. Your sensitivity is no longer a flaw, it is a compass. You are no longer vulnerable because you need to be held. You are vulnerable because you have become the one who holds. And what you hold is not only your story, you hold the sorrow that was never spoken, the tenderness that was never safe, the love that was never allowed to breathe. Now you no longer open your heart to earn belonging. You open it because it is your truth. Because your openness is not a request, it is a presence, it is a light, it is a transmission that tells the world, I have survived without closing. I have walked through fire without becoming ash. I have loved without losing myself. This is what ends the cycle, not the silence of avoidance, but the clarity of presence. Not the repetition of defense, but the reinvention of truth. And when you live this way, something changes in the unseen. The spell is broken, the loop dissolves, and you begin to live not from the wound, but from the wellspring of your becoming. To keep your heart open after pain is not weakness, it is mastery. It is the unseen revolution, and you are carrying it beautifully. Carl Jung taught that the awakening of the soul does not arise from rebellion for its own sake, but from the sacred pull of authenticity. The soul does not shout, it whispers through discomfort, through dissonance, through the quiet realization that something ancient must end in order for something living to begin. And perhaps that is why you found this message today, not by chance, but by resonance. Because somewhere inside you, even before you could name it, your soul made a vow, this ends with me. But let us be clear, this ending is not rejection, it is liberation. It is not a disowning of your lineage, but the deepest act of love it could ever receive. For in choosing to stop repeating what hurt you, you are not dishonoring your past. You are honoring it with truth. You are offering your ancestors the one thing they were never given: healing, not through judgment, but through light. Not by escaping your roots, but by watering them differently. You did not come here to break everything. You came to tend the wound until it no longer bleeds into the next generation. You came not to fight, but to forgive, not to abandon, but to realign. And even if no one around you understands, even if you walk much of this path alone, something in the collective field shifts because of you. Something realigns in silence every time you choose differently, every time you act from presence rather than programming. Jung believed that transformation happens when the unconscious becomes conscious. That is precisely what you are doing now. You are no longer sleepwalking through inherited pain. You are feeling it fully, seeing it clearly, and choosing to move through it with love rather than fear. That is how cycles close, not with a dramatic gesture, but with quiet courage. So if this message touched something unspoken in you, if it stirred a memory not of the mind but of the soul, it is because you are already standing at the threshold of transformation. And if you choose to continue walking this path, not only for yourself, but for those who came before and those yet to come, then trust this: you are not alone. Here, we do not just reflect, we remember, we reclaim, we become. You are the end of the wound and the beginning of the healing. If this message stirred something inside you, don't stop here. The next video will take you even deeper into the journey of healing, growth, and self-discovery. It might just be the breakthrough your soul has been waiting for. Tap into it now. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and join a community committed to truth, transformation, and real inner change. You're not alone on this path. I'll meet you in the next video, where we continue becoming who we were always meant to be.